Okay, we have some breaking news to bring you now as GoFundMe says the Freedom Convoy protest is in violation of its terms of service and no more of the $10 million raised will go to the organizers. The statement reads, "We now have evidence from law enforcement that the previously peaceful demonstration has become an occupation with police reports of violence and other unlawful activity. Given how this situation has evolved, no further funds will be directly distributed to the Freedom Convoy organizers. We will work with organizers to send all remaining funds to credible and established charities verified by GoFundMe. Anyone who donated can request a refund." Now, questions will remain, though, about GoFundMe's role in this movement, and NDP MP Alistair MacGregor wants GoFundMe to answer those questions before Parliament at a committee. He's in Duncan, British Columbia. Mr. MacGregor, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
What's your reaction to this decision by GoFundMe to cut the money off?
Well, I think it's a very positive development. Canadians have been very rightly concerned by what the convoy protest has turned into in Ottawa. We've all seen the expressions of hate, the Nazi paraphernalia, the abuse that Ottawa citizens have had to suffer. Businesses have been unable to open, employees have been unable to go to work. And there were some very real questions about GoFundMe's funding model, particularly the fact that many of the donations were coming from anonymous sources from overseas, and just making sure that there was transparency and accountability to ensure that that wasn't funding any form of hatred or violence on the streets.
Now that it's shut down, does this change your desire to have people from the company testify before a parliamentary committee?
No, I think there is still some worth to asking GoFundMe representatives to come before our committee because while they did take the right steps, I think their internal mechanisms work this time. I still think there are some questions that maybe they can provide answers to ensure something like this doesn't happen in the future, that we do in fact have the appropriate safeguards. And perhaps we might find as a committee that there are some gaps in policy that we as a parliamentary committee and policymakers can be addressing.
Has GoFundMe responded to this call to testify? Do you know yet if this will happen?
It's a relatively early development. It was only yesterday that the committee unanimously adopted the motion. So, our clerk now has the authority to go and make that request. And I think we as committee members are probably next week as a very, very early item of business going to discuss how we can fit this into our schedule.
So GoFundMe says they're taking this decision because they got new information that this had essentially become an occupation and there was complaints of violence and harassment from police. I mean, should it take getting to this point for a move like this to happen?
Well, I think the warning signs were there last weekend in the early days when we saw Nazi flags being flown. Even some of the convoy organizers, I mean, we've all seen the online videos from some of the organizers who were espousing white supremacist views. Some people were wearing the yellow stars of David, which is an incredibly anti-Semitic display. So I think the warning signs were there that this convoy was turning into something much more and further beyond the original reason, which was against mandates. I mean, everyone supports the peaceful right to protest, but this morphed into something that crossed a line and became quite ugly.
The funding model, though, is still in place, right? And who knows what the next protest could be and, whatever the cause might be. But does this mechanism that allows for anonymous and according to the police, foreign donations to fund something that is shutting down a major Canadian city right now, is there a legislative change required here or a regulatory change that the government needs to look at on this one?
Perhaps, David, because we know other state actors like Russia and China notably, they could be using platforms like this for their own nefarious ends. The possibility exists that foreign sources could be using these platforms to fund extremism in our home country. I'm not saying that that is what is happening, but there are legitimate questions around the fact that it could happen. And so, one of the roles of a parliamentary committee is to, start these inquiries so that we can be better informed as policymakers, make the appropriate recommendations to government, and hold, of course, the Minister of Public Safety to account for, making sure his ministry is on top of things like this.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Like no ability to know where the money is coming from, and really no ability to know where the money is going, because there's no transparency on that end either. Alistair MacGregor, thanks so much for coming on tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for your interest in this story.